Episode 24, Owl's Well That Ends Well. For this episode, the main character reigns go to Spike. There are times where I feel it should be the main 7, not the main 6, because Spike is just as much of a main character as the ponies are. The episode starts with Twilight and Spike getting ready to go see a meteor shower. It's here we see just how much Spike does for Twilight, which is why she considers him her #1 assistant, which Spike clearly takes with great pride and arrogance. So much so that he makes Twilight repeat it constantly. Thankfully, Twilight is able to catch on to what he's saying. Also, I feel this is another example of Twilight being autistic, because people have done that to me and it's taken me a while to catch on. They leave, but not before getting one more old dusty book, and it's really dusty because poor Spike sneezes on it, and as a dragon this has pretty bad consequences. Spike puts the book back, not telling Twilight he's accidentally destroyed it. Not so much the #1 assistant now, are we, Spike? Twilight questions where the book has gone, and Spike still isn't able to admit that he accidentally destroyed it. He brushes this off, however, by suggesting that maybe someone borrowed it. Thankfully for Spike, Twilight is able to believe this. Spike sets up everything, including a picnic blanket and food, which Rainbow Dash immediately helps herself to, and even compliments that Twilight has such a rad assistant. The other main characters then gather to also congratulate Spike on everything he does. Rarity considers him such a little star that she made a little bow for him, and considering how much we know of Spike's crush on Rarity, he loves that greatly. It's at this point the meteor shower starts, and Sweetie Belle's lucky she didn't get trampled to death. Everyone is amazed by the meteor shower, but Spike seems to be falling asleep during it. Later on, when everyone is enjoying snacks, they notice that Spike has fallen asleep in the punch bowl. This leads to Pinkie making a pretty funny pun joke about how the punch has been spiked. Back at Twilight's library, she puts Spike to sleep before starting to write a paper on comets, but she stops when she hears creaking outside. She goes outside to investigate. Good thing that this is a kid show, because I feel this would be the start of a horror movie if it wasn't. She hears creaking again, looks outside, and the wind blows in. Again, I feel this is really misleading and belongs in a horror movie. The paper flies out the window and she is forced to go get it. Thankfully, she notices that an owl has brought her paper back. The owl starts to leave, but Twilight begs it to stay. She thanks the owl for their help, and upon seeing that it's a cold night, invites them inside. The owl accepts and comes inside. The next morning, Spike is horrified to discover that he has overslept. Spike is worried that Twilight will be angry that he hasn't done his morning chores, but Twilight tells him not to worry, as Owlowiscious has already done the chores for him. Spike asks who this is, and Twilight reveals that he's the new junior assistant, and that he's going to help Spike with his chores so he won't be so tired all the time. You know, sometimes it occurs to me that Twilight overworks Spike a bit too much, and considering Spike is a literal child, I can't help but wonder if she's breaking some child labor laws here. Maybe they don't apply to Spike because he's a dragon. Really starting to question how the ponies see you, Spike. Spike tries to argue that he doesn't need a junior assistant and that he's fine, but Twilight says he's just here to help out a little. Twilight has to leave and tells Spike to introduce himself to Owlowiscious. Spike goes to meet Owlowiscious, but is at first freaked out because of his ability to turn his head all the way around. Spike introduces himself, and Owlowiscious obviously replies back with a typical owl hoot, which of course leads to that old joke of someone constantly saying who they are and the owl only replying with hoot. Spike eventually gets fed up, but then reminds Owlowiscious that no matter what, he's #1, and Owlowiscious is #2. I want to pause quickly and just say, at this point, Twilight has adopted Owlowiscious as her pet owl, and this is a character who would make many appearances throughout the show, before eventually just disappearing completely by the end of Season 4 from what I remember. I could be wrong. If I am, please tell me so in the comments below. Spike now has the mindset that the owl is out for his job and wants to take over as Twilight's #1 assistant, and he's determined to prove to Twilight that he's still #1. I'm pretty sure this episode made me cringe as a teenager, but now it just makes me laugh because Spike is a child, so of course he's going to overreact to things. We then see Spike is reading up on owls, while Twilight shows Owlowiscious off to the other main ponies. They of course love Owlowiscious, which makes Spike more jealous. He gets especially jealous when Rarity makes Owlowiscious a bow identical to the one she made for him. Spike tries to prove himself when Twilight asks him to fetch a book, but Owlowiscious fetches it before he can. This of course makes Spike angrier, but he tries to prove himself again when she asks for another book. But of course, Owlowiscious gets it first. He's a quick one, isn't he? Which only makes Spike angrier and angrier. Then Twilight's quill breaks and Spike is determined to get her another one. This leads him on a crazy adventure. I'm not going to go into detail here, because this scene is like Deadpool 2, because while it's funny and great, it's overall pointless because even though Spike manages to get a feather from a chicken, Twilight reveals that Owlowiscious gave her one of his feathers, and now she's using it as a quill. Twilight says there's still a lot of chores for Spike to do, and Spike offers to stay up all night doing them, but then he falls asleep. Guess you wore yourself out on that pointless adventure, didn't you, Spike? Twilight assures Owlowiscious that Spike will come around because he's genuinely a good guy. Unfortunately, the next morning, Twilight discovers Spike's little accident from the start of the episode. Twilight is understandably pissed because not only was the book where it was supposed to be, but it's now all burnt up. She demands Spike tell her how this happened. Spike admits he just didn't want to disappoint Twilight, then asks if she's ever seen a dragon sneeze, but she just responds with she's seen a dragon lie. I know you were worried about making her angry, Spike, but it's better to just tell the truth when something like that happens. Twilight even expressed that she's very disappointed in Spike. Spike of course blames Owlowiscious for this, thinking that he set him up. Spike, this is literally your fault. Spike is now convinced Owlowiscious is out to take his place, and so Spike decides to do the stupidest thing possible. Frame him. After seeing that Rarity has left her boutique, Spike sneaks in and steals one of Opal's mouse toys. Considering how obsessed Spike is with Rarity, I'm amazed he'd want to steal anything from her. Spike's plan is that he's going to rip the mouse up and spread it all over Twilight's floor, and when she sees it, she's going to blame Owlowiscious because owls eat mice. You can be evil sometimes, Spike. This might seem insignificant, but I want to call Spike out for not closing Rarity's door. That's just a jerk move, mate. You always close the door. Spike returns to the library, rips up the toy mouse, spreads its stuffing all over the floor, then covers it with tomato sauce for good measure. Then, for some reason, he rips up Twilight's pillow and starts spreading feathers all over the floor. I guess this was to further incriminate Owlowiscious. Unfortunately, he doesn't realize he's left tomato sauce footprints all over the floor. And this was incredibly stupid because, you guessed it, Twilight catches him in the act. Twilight even says she doesn't know what upsets her more, that Spike tried to frame Owlowiscious or that he thought this would work. Honestly, I think that he thought this was work because it was a pretty bad plan. She then lectures Spike about how he's let the jealousy get the better of him, and how this is not the Spike she knows and loves. Twilight leaves, and Spike is heartbroken, thinking that Twilight doesn't love him anymore. So Spike does the second stupidest thing possible. He runs away, but to his credit, Spike is a kid, and I'm pretty sure a lot of us tried this at some point. We then see Spike in the Everfree Forest with a knapsack, having run away, and contemplating how he thinks Twilight hates him. He also ponders how it could get any worse, which was, ironically, the worst thing to say, because then it starts raining. You never say, could this get any worse, because that's when it gets worse. Spike enters a cave for shelter as he thinks it's empty, and is overjoyed to discover that there is a mountain of gems there, which, as you'll remember, is his favorite snack. Spike is briefly satisfied by the feast he gets to partake in, but he still misses Twilight and the Pony Gang. However, Spike soon discovers that he isn't actually alone, as steam starts to fill the cave and he realizes another dragon is in there. The dragon asks Spike what's he doing in his cave, and why Spike is eating his gems. Spike tries to play innocent by pointing out that he didn't know it was the dragon's cave or his gems. He asks the dragon if they're cool, but they clearly aren't. Spike tries to stand up to the dragon, but this dragon is much bigger than he is, and this dragon has very sharp claws and a spiky tail, and currently Spike can't conjure up enough fire to seem intimidating. This dragon, on the other hand, can. Spike tries to leave, but this other dragon is angry and won't let him leave. Spike resigns himself to death, but then we hear the hooting of Owlowiscious, who comes in to save Spike from the dragon, as he actually manages to fight off the dragon, even hurting the dragon by fooling him to hit himself with his own spiked tail. Twilight even reveals herself to be at the entrance to the cave and calls Spike over. Spike hops on Twilight's back and the three of them begin to flee. They try to escape, but it's too dark for Twilight to see. Thankfully, as an owl, Owlowiscious can see in the dark, and they follow him out of the forest. When they're safe, Twilight asks Spike why he ran away because she was so worried about him. Spike confesses it's because he thought she didn't need him anymore, and that she didn't love him anymore. Twilight admits that while she was disappointed, Spike will always be her #1 assistant and friend. Twilight confesses that she also needs help at night and she can't ask Spike to stay up all night as he's a baby dragon. And again, you'd probably be breaking child labor laws. Owls, however, are nocturnal, so Owlowiscious is able to help Twilight during the night. However, she never intended for Owlowiscious to take Spike's place. They both apologize to each other, as Spike acknowledges he shouldn't have been so jealous, and Twilight acknowledges she should have been more sensitive to Spike's feelings. Spike then apologizes to Owlowiscious and asks for forgiveness. However, Owlowiscious again just responds with hoot, which Spike mistakes as him saying who. For God's sake, Spike, owls can't talk. Twilight, however, just thinks this is funny and tells Spike that Owlowiscious forgives him. When back at Twilight's library, Twilight suggests that maybe Spike should write the letter to Princess Celestia, as he was the one that learnt a lesson this episode. Spike learnt that being jealous and telling lies will get you nowhere, especially in friendship. He also learned that there's plenty of love for every friend to share. Unfortunately, Spike falls asleep before he can finish the letter, but I think his lesson was clear. When I was a kid, I considered this one of the lesser episodes of Season 1, but looking at it now, I can see a better side to it. Like with the Crusader episodes, it accurately shows how kids act sometimes. While Spike is generally a good kid, he is prone to jealousy and runs away when he feels not enough attention has been given to him or if he feels no one likes him anymore. One could argue that makes him a bit of a brat, but I don't think it makes him a brat, it just makes him a typical kid. And I applaud this show for portraying that accurately. Thanks for watching, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you at the next review.